Advanced Studio Classroom is on the air. Join us today as we discuss tips for the workplace. Hello, listeners, and welcome back to another Advanced Studio Classroom. I'm your host for today. My name is Simon, and you are joining me for our May business article. This article is called Workplace Pointers, and it's actually a two-day article that discusses two different topics. Today's topic is called Fear, a Destroyer of Teamwork. And we're going to have a look at the office or workplace dynamic and ways that you can set that environment to be one that is ideally suited for success. Now, it is May 8th, and so if you have your Advanced Studio Classroom magazine, you can have a look at the lesson for May 8th. Joining me today in the studio, I have two expert panelists, experts on creating positive business environments and workplace culture, because they're both great people to work with. First, we have Pauline. Welcome back.
Well, hey, it's always great to be here, and that was very nice of you to say that. I wouldn't have gone that far to say I'm an expert, but I do hope to bring a positive attitude to the work I do.
Well, I couldn't say you're a difficult person and hard to work with, Pauline.
That
would have ruined everything right from the beginning. Our second panelist today is Jack Smith. Welcome back, Jack.
Hi, Simon. Hi, Pauline. Thanks again for having me. And I don't know if I would call myself an expert, but I've worked in a number of different workplace environments, and I do have some sales experience, so maybe I can talk a little bit about it.
I'm looking forward to it. Now, our deck for today's article, under workplace pointers, pointers, of course, are tips, is learn how to protect the workplace and how to become a top salesperson. So today, we're going to be talking about protecting the workplace because, as I mentioned, our title for today's lesson is Fear, a Destroyer of Teamwork. And so the idea here is we want to avoid fear and we want to avoid the destruction of teamwork. Listeners, you can find the first reading for today's lesson on the left-hand column of page 18 in your magazine. Why don't you open up your magazines now and join us as we read the first reading.
Workplace Pointers. Learn how to protect the workplace and how to become a top salesperson. Fear, a destroyer of teamwork. What if I said that success in the knowledge economy is predicated on having a corporate climate that does not ridicule, silence, or intimidate the steady flow of new ideas, questions from left field, experimentation, or out-loud brainstorming, but allows for such things to be a key part of the creative process? Does such a work environment sound too good to be true? Not if people-centered leaders can create the conditions necessary for these outcomes to happen. And this premise can be described in two crucial words: psychological safety. In research conducted for her book, The Fearless Organization, Creating Psychological Safety in the Workplace for Learning, Innovation, and Growth, Amy C. Edmondson, a professor at the Harvard Business School, finds that psychological safety is the antidote to toxic, fear-based management structures still so prevalent today.
Listeners, thank you for joining us today as we discuss this important topic. Now, a quick note before we get into this. This is kind of an article written for managers. But one of the main things that appealed to me as I was reading it is that it is thick with business jargon and terms. And so I think that's probably going to be the focus of much of our discussion today. So even if you are a person who is a worker and not a manager, there's all kinds of interesting stuff for you to explore and learn about and get into in this article. So bear with us. The first interesting term comes right up in the first line, the first sentence, knowledge economy. Jack, can you tell us what a knowledge economy is?
Simon, I have no idea.
That's okay. It's a tricky term. Most of our listeners will be familiar with this word economy, and an economy is just all of the different markets, the economic system for a place. A knowledge economy describes one kind of economy, and I think the main idea of a knowledge economy is that, unlike other systems, the key feature of a knowledge economy is knowledge. So the idea being skilled, educated workers. So you're dealing in ideas and services more than you're dealing in physical products and things like that. And this term, knowledge economy, it gets thrown around a lot in business news without people really necessarily understanding what it means, right?
Like me.
Well, that's right. And I think you are very much not alone in that. And so what we're hearing here is, what if I said that success in the knowledge economy is predicated on having a corporate climate that is very nice, basically is what they're saying. And so this knowledge economy, to have success in an economy where knowledge and ideas and education are really important driving factors, is predicated on, so basically means built on or dependent on it, needs this kind of corporate climate. And they get into then a list, and I'm going to ask Pauline to go over the meaning of the different rules in the list of things that you can't do in an environment if you want to succeed in the knowledge.
I liked the way they used environment as another word that we would use for corporate climate. Corporate climate seems like another one that comes up in a lot of business articles where they're talking about what kind of, feeling do you want to have? What are the philosophies of that place and how do they work? Anyways, so they're saying the kind of environment that you need is one that does not ridicule, so make fun of other people, dismiss people's ideas, silence or intimidate the steady flow of new ideas, and questions from left field. Left field, you'll see that's a vocabulary focus today, and it just means it seems really random and strange. It's really bizarre, we might say. And they're saying, you shouldn't ridicule those. You shouldn't silence them or just dismiss them. Not doing that is a bad thing for your corporate climate if you want to have a good knowledge-based economy. Also, we have experimentation or out loud brainstorming is another thing you want, and you don't want to be dismissing or pushing aside. And instead, it allows for these things to be a part of the creative process.
So this actually, once you wade through the language of this first section, it seems to be the sort of thing that makes sense. If you want to build a business that relies on smart, creative workers, you can't make fun of the workers or ignore their ideas or not let them experiment. That's basically it, right? And the best practical example I can think of that just immediately jumps to mind is that often said story about companies like Google, where they let workers spend, 10% or 20% of their time working on projects that are interesting to them for the company. So they're giving people a chance to sort of experiment and explore and use their brains. And that would be an example of the right thing to do in this knowledge economy.
And that's a nice example of a company that is really a knowledge economy-based company. I was thinking also like marketing would be a realm that really is marketing. Marketing is a knowledge economy. It's coming up with creative ideas for how to get people to buy things. Also, of course, any kind of media is going to be a knowledge economy. So you can think of some of those different examples as we go through this lesson and think about how they're going to need creative people with lots of different ideas. And some of those ideas are going to be from totally left field. There's going to be a lot of brainstorming, and you need people willing to do that and not scared to bring their ideas to the table. So
basically, just as in way of a quick summary, what we're saying is to succeed in a knowledge economy, to succeed in sort of creative, innovative business, you have to create an environment where people feel free to create and think and experiment. You can't prevent them from doing those things. And then midway through the paragraph, we come to this question. Does such a work environment sound too good to be true?
I think that's a weird question. To me, it seems like, no, that should obviously be the environment in which a knowledge economy is functioning in. I think maybe it's a little bit sad statement if this author really believes that there are a lot of people working within those businesses who can't even imagine such a situation occurring. Like, that's concerning.
I suppose a lot of that depends on sort of the size of company you work in and the industry you work in and different things like that. But I think for a lot of people, a lot of people are working for very big companies that have very stiff or rigid hierarchical structures. That word hierarchical just means you have a boss and your boss has a boss and everybody's doing what their boss tells them to do, right? And so for a lot of people who are working in situations like that, maybe it does seem like a dream.
Yeah, and you know what? I was thinking about this question, Pauline, because I didn't think about, it seems like, no, that's not too good to be true. But okay, so here's what I was thinking. So for many people, perhaps, if they went into their supervisor's office with an idea, they wouldn't be immediately dismissed or shut down why are you telling me this? But I don't know if they would necessarily if it would give a positive impression. Their boss might not. They might say, "Okay, thank you for telling me," but then they might feel a little bit less positive about that employee, perhaps, and maybe it would affect the way that they are seen in the workplace. So maybe a lot of people feel like, I don't feel safe sharing any of this because I might get kind of a lower on my boss's list of people,
That's an interesting point. If you feel like, well, because if it sounds like a crazy idea, then the boss might have a negative impression as opposed to thinking, it's great that this person is just constantly coming up with ideas. We're not going to go with all of them, but at least they're being creative and trying to think of things. Right. It really depends on the boss, the supervisor that you have, whether that's going to be considered a positive or an annoyance.
Yeah, exactly.
Or seen as something just, unwanted. It's a good point.
Extra. Why are you, maybe not actually saying it, but well, we don't really need your idea.
You kind of have to feel for the poor boss too, though, right? Because workers don't always understand the big picture of what people are trying to do with a company or an organization. And so I liked that term. They said ideas or questions from left field. Way out in left field is usually the phrase. And that just means ideas that have nothing to do with what is going on. They're just totally removed, right?
Yeah.
And you can get a lot of that. And so actually, as we continue on with this article, we're going to get into some very specific examples of what they're talking about. But before we get to that, let's just say this dream environment where people are able to think and create and all of these things, it is not impossible, according to our article, if leaders can create conditions necessary for these things to happen. And so what are the two words that people need to, the two words that describe what people need to be doing to create this environment? The words are psychological safety. And that gets us to the end of that introductory paragraph. As we go into the next paragraph, it tells us that there's been some research conducted for a new book. The book is The Fearless Organization, Creating Psychological Safety in the Workplace for Learning, Innovation, and Growth. Kind of a long title there.
That's right. And it's by an author who probably none of us know, so they give us her credentials. So this tells us why we should be interested in what she has to say. She's not just any random woman who wrote a book. She is a professor at the Harvard Business School. So we know she's an expert in this field.
Okay. And I guess the idea is that in this book, she presents this idea that managers can create this environment. They can act as an antidote to this fear-based work by doing certain things and not doing other things. In our next reading, we're going to get into this idea a little more of what this author means by psychological safety. And listeners, you can see that reading in the right-hand column on page 18 of your magazines. Let's have a look at that now.
Psychological safety defined. Edmondson succinctly describes psychological safety in a recent podcast. Psychological safety is a belief that I can bring my full self to work. It's a sense that my voice will be welcomed if I speak up with work-relevant issues, questions, concerns, and even mistakes. The reason this is so important today, says Edmondson, is because we live in a world in which knowledge, insight, and expertise are the currency and the source of value creation in industries ranging from healthcare to retail to technology. If I have knowledge, but I can't use that knowledge or express that knowledge because I'm holding back for some reason, then value is lost, says Edmondson. Not only that, but people who do speak out in ways that threaten hierarchy and authority are typically fired. Edmondson says fear is costly, as talent, knowledge, and expertise are lost. Another Harvard Business School professor, James L. Heskett, wrote up a great advanced summary of the book, stating that fear inhibits learning and cooperation and fosters an epidemic of silence. Psychological safety, on the other hand, leads to greater learning, performance, and even lower mortality in a healthcare setting.
All right. And so at the beginning of this reading, we get a succinct definition. Succinct just means quick and simple. So Edmondson succinctly describes psychological safety. And she did this in a recent podcast. How did she define psychological safety, Jack?
Psychological safety is a belief that I can bring my full self to work. It's a sense that my voice will be welcomed if I speak up with work-relevant issues, questions, concerns, and even mistakes.
Yeah. Pauline, you pointed out a little earlier today, before we were on the program, that the key word in this is work-relevant issues.
Because earlier we had talked about questions from left field, how they're just kind of way out there. They sound kind of bizarre or crazy. And she's saying if you want to have a good corporate climate for a knowledge-based economy, you need to be able to accept these ideas. And it starts to bring this question like, well, you can just talk about anything to your boss, and that you can understand why that could start to be very stressful for a boss to just be hearing all the crazy ideas that everybody has all the time. But this gives us a little bit more of a limited understanding of what they mean here. They're saying, yes, sometimes we have really out-of-the-box thinking about problems that your work is having, and it's important to listen to those and brainstorm, but they need to be work-relevant issues. It's not just anything about life and, if you're in an accounting firm all of a sudden talking about how you have this dream to do a TV program, it has to have something, it has to be something relevant to your job.
So we're not talking about workers here who are saying things like, I need to improve my creativity, so I am going to be doing painting this afternoon at my desk. We're not talking about ideas that are sort of personal in nature. We're talking about people coming up with ideas that are related to their work. So people are doing their work. They're just kind of doing it in a creative way. And I guess the idea here is that when she says you want to be able to bring your full self to work, the idea is that a lot of workers have sort of hidden experiences and talents and skills that really they do not use at their job. In fact, companies often don't have any idea what kinds of skills and talents their workers have, like a diverse range of skills. And the idea is that you want to be able to bring all of your experiences, all of your best to the job you're doing.
Right. So, for example, even with like concerns or questions that you have, let's say somebody has been hired to write articles. So for us, we work at a magazine media. But then as that writer is doing things, they realize that there's something about a computer program that they're using that they see as really inefficient. And that person has a lot of experience with computer programming. Maybe they would go and say, hey, I have noticed this thing. I know I'm not hired for this, but I have some expertise in this area. I could give you some hints about better programs you could use or ways that this could be used more efficiently. Mm-hmm. And that's a great example of somebody who has some expertise that's really giving them some ideas to better as a company, even though it's not the exact question or concern that they've been hired to work on.
Okay, Pauline, the example you're giving me is helping me understand the knowledge economy. So you might say that they're the business who would value that person's ideas, their knowledge, is increasing their knowledge economy because now they're adding value to it, right? Because they have this person who has this resource, they have this experience, and if they will listen to them, then that increases their economy, right?
Yeah, well, that's what they go on to say here. They say in the next paragraph, the reason this is so important today, says Edmondson, our author, is because we live in a world in which knowledge, insight, and expertise are the currency. So kind of like the money and the source of value creation in industry and all kinds of different industries. She's saying from healthcare to retail to technology. And then we get a quote. If I have knowledge, but I can't use that knowledge or express that knowledge because I'm holding back for some reason, then value is lost. And the best way I can think of to illustrate this is that when I was a university student, we were encouraged to do double majors, to do two majors at one time. And the idea being that some people have something they really love but isn't a very marketable skill, so they can do one major that helps you get a job and one thing that they're kind of interested in. Other people did majors that were complementary. They sort of helped each other out. But one of the problems you have when you do double majors is that you rarely find a job that is looking for a person with those two majors. You kind of have to make your own niche when you graduate from that sort of program. And I think that's kind of the idea here. If you have a degree in biology and economics, you're going to get a job either in biology or in economics, but not a job that right off the bat is looking to use both of those skills. And so the idea here being smart companies want to be able to tap into all of that other knowledge that employees have, because those employees might be able to see connections and ways of dealing things that aren't immediately clear to everybody.
Right. So not every job that person does, let's say they get a economics job, not every job's going to have anything to do with biology, but there might be something that comes up that is work relevant, right? That all of a sudden taps into that, and then they have a whole another range of information they can provide if the company is willing to listen to their other set of expertise or ideas that flow from that.
Yeah, the danger of all of this knowledge becomes clear in our next paragraph where they say, people who do speak out in ways that threaten hierarchy and authority are typically fired. And so what we're talking about here, I used that term hierarchy before, and we explained it as just being like everyone has a boss and your boss has a boss. There's an organizational structure where some people are higher than others. And the idea is that if you embarrass your boss or you make your boss look bad or you challenge your boss too much, you're not going to have a job for very long. And so people sometimes will not speak or not challenge or not bring up ideas because they're afraid that that will happen to them.
Of course, I feel like there's kind of two sides of one coin on this. On one hand, I think management definitely needs to be working on becoming safe people for their the people under them to come and bring them good ideas and to give the freedom for that, not be threatened by other people's expertise. On the other hand, as the employee who's bringing ideas to your boss, I think there is a way to do that that is not threatening, and there are ways to do that that do come across as know-it-all or come across that you think that you could do a better job than the boss is, and of course that's not going to go over well either. So I think both sides have a role in making that go smoothly.
Another Harvard professor, James L. Heskett, wrote a summary of this book and basically gave us these words: fear inhibits learning and cooperation and fosters an epidemic of silence. And on the other hand, psychological safety leads to greater learning, performance, and even lower mortality in a healthcare setting. So what does all of that mean? Well, it means that when people are afraid, they don't learn as well, they don't cooperate as well, and they stay quiet. Everybody stays quiet. They don't say anything. Whereas when people have a feeling of psychological safety, they learn more, they perform better, and they're actually physically healthier. There's a little sidebar at the bottom of page 18 in your magazine called Heskett's Summary of Edmondson's book gives us strategies we can implement right now. And I think we'll probably read through this just at the end of our program today because it gives a very clear idea of the points that are being suggested by this book. Like, what does this psychologically safe environment look like? Pauline, do you want to share the first one? And then Jack, you can share the next one. We'll just take turns.
All right. Managers must destigmatize failure and reframe it primarily as an opportunity to increase learning and growing.
And that just means you can't punish people or make them feel bad if they fail, as long as they learn from the experience, right? Jack?
Managers must emphasize why voice, elimination of fear to contribute, is important and remind people of why what they do matters.
Yeah, so people need to feel valued. The next one is, managers must practice humble listening and invite others to participate by purposefully probing to find out what others are seeing and thinking. So, in short, managers need to have a good way to gather information about what's going on from other people. Pauline?
Managers must sincerely express appreciation for the contributions by others.
Yeah, so again, make people feel valued. And the last one, Jack?
Accept the notion that fear does not belong in the workplace.
Good stuff. So we don't want our workers to be afraid. That brings us to the end of Fear, a Destroyer of Teamwork. But listeners, please be sure to join us tomorrow for the second part of our May business article. We're going to be talking about sales and being a master salesperson. So be sure to join us then. Until then, goodbye.
Goodbye.